My parents, Maxine and Jim Wilson, were in Hawaii. My father was second generation, born in Hilo, Hawaii. My grandfather came over as a civil engineer for the fledgling agricultural industry of sugar and pineapples, and he was there to develop irrigation systems and became quite a notable person. My father also followed in his footsteps and was a civil engineer and developed one of the largest engineering companies in the Pacific Basin in the Philippines. Probably one of the most meaningful things that they shared with me was they were living in a home that had a view of Pearl Harbor. And on December 7th, 1941, from their home, they watched the bombing of Pearl Harbor. My mother was a nurse and she took off and went to a hospital. My father was in charge of moving munitions. Neither of them saw each other for 3.5 weeks. So at the conclusion of the war, I came along and probably lived in the glory of Hawaii. It became a state in 1959. I was there for the 50s and the 60s until I left for college. My father introduced me to the ocean. By age 8, I had a small boat going out into the ocean through the reef. By age 12, I was in a 13.5-foot boat with a 20 horsepower engine chasing tuna 2 and 3 miles offshore. My father was instrumental in teaching me ways of setting lobster nets and setting gill nets and catching fish and of course fixing the nets. I will, in my lifetime, always be indebted to him for the introduction to the ocean. My passion was fishing, and I applied the principles I learned fishing into the rest of my life. Okay, well, first is passion, second is persistence, third is perfection, fourth is being prepared, and fifth is patience, I think it was, yeah. I was blessed with 3 sons and a daughter. Fatherhood was as dramatic in changing my life and being conscious of continuous love, number one, being conscious of the fact that everything that I felt was important to do may not be as important in the lives of the others. We, my wife and I, made the commitment to spend literally every weekend with our kids. And we did that at Lake Powell for approximately a decade and a few years after. And we told our kids, you can bring anybody you want. You can honor our values. We welcome all as long as they adhere to it. Some weekends we had as many as 30, depending, and they were all different ages. And we were really blessed to spend a quality segment of our lives with our kids. And of course, Linda gets a lot of credit for that. Being a father, to me, was guiding and sharing a life of opportunity. I felt strongly that there were only a few life lessons that I needed to teach. I didn't care what my kids did, and I had no desire in encouraging them into a specific career or profession. But I did want them to have passion. My life is a fork in the road. I left Hawaii and went to Utah State. Going to Logan, Utah was in fact a game changer in my life for a lot of reasons. Hitchhiked from Logan, Utah down to Mexico, and from Mexico up to Vancouver, and stopped at every school along the way. And from Vancouver over to Boise and then back to Logan, Utah. I did not know of the LDS faith. One of the leading questions was, are you Mormon? No, I'm rich. I don't know Mormon. I was mesmerized by the concept of a loving and caring family, which I had never been exposed to in my life. I was fortunate enough to have a person that I knew that knew my wife. I met her and I said to myself, I'm going to marry that gal. And there was a lot of groveling and a lot of sincere begging to get her to even go and have an ice cream. Going to get a real estate license and or a broker license, which I got. I did that for 5 or 6 years. Had sadness and success, like many do in that particular profession. And Linda and I watched the opening ceremonies, the Olympics in LA. And about 11 o'clock, and I said, I gotta go. I need to be down there. So I drove all night. After 12 days, I returned and went back to my real estate endeavors. And a few months later, President Gerald R. Sherritt of Southern Utah University called me up on a Saturday and said, I'm looking at doing a sports festival. To me, it was the Olympics for the state of Utah. So the next 12 years, we're with the Utah Summer Games. We have over 550,000 participants today. The Summer Games was one of the great highlights of my life. After 12 years, and I went to my sweet wife after I had turned my resignation into President Sherritt and said, I'm going to go and build some homes. And she gave me her favorite expression, which I got quite well acquainted with, which was, you're going to do what? And for the next 3 years, I built and developed Eagle Point in Fiddler's Canyon, which was a townhome project. And then my son, my eldest son, said, will you help me get started in a building project? And I said yes. And we built a company called Generations Development. And I was with him every day for 10 years. To be able to work with a son was without a doubt one of the great accomplishments and thrills of my life. And then my son left me. He was horribly sick with fibromyalgia and in pain 24/7. And my best friend and sidekick decided that he needed to move on. One event rises to the top of all the crazy things I got involved with, and that was the USA-USR Friendship Tour. 2 women behind me are talking about the greatest gymnastics event in the Cold War era that was going to come to America. I turned to them and I said, where's it going to go? And they said, well, they haven't decided yet. Well, who would you talk to in the United States Gymnastics Federation? In those days, with payphones, I called her up. She said, I really don't think a little town in southern Utah has any chance of this event. I called her every day. I promised the United States Gymnastics Federation if they would consider Cedar City, I would get them a concert. I would get them a parade. I would bring the PRCA Cowboys. And if there was anything else they wanted, I would do it. I flew out to Indianapolis and met with them. Approximately 2 weeks later, they announced the cities, Denver, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and our media site will be Cedar City, Utah. The hundreds of volunteers, one especially named Matt Johnson, I went to seek out and said, I don't have a clue, I just promised all this stuff. How are we going to do it? And he's like, well, we'll do this, Wilson. In those fleeting moments, with the support of my family and my wife saying, you're going to do what? Again, we did it. My faith journey really started at 18 when I left for Utah State from Hawaii. But I had grown up on the north shore of Oahu. And here was this temple, and I didn't drive by it, but look at it and think how beautiful it is in the stark north shore contrast. So I go to Utah State, and I'm mesmerized by the families. I engulf that part of my path of faith as much as anything else I did, except for fishing, of course. Took the lessons and I was baptized. From there, I had some choice experiences. And I was 13 years with the married students in the married ward. I was surrounded by young adults who had very little except their faith. And I have a testimony that is not only special to me, but special to my family. And in times of turbulence in our family, I was able to deal with it in a manner that I didn't think I'd be capable of. That was always willing to give good service and help to others, cared about his family, that appreciated his wife. I would hope that my kids would say he was an okay dad, he tried real hard, he worked a hell of a lot and was gone all the time, but he still made time for us. I could eat rice, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Cedar City, Utah. Hemingway, Old Man and the Sea, and I believe are my two favorite words in our church. My favorite hymn in life is Climb Every Mountain.
Rich is really an interesting person, and that's what drew me to him, I think. He was the most unique, well, you can see that kind of, but one of the most unique people I'd ever met. I had actually a roommate, a sorority sister, that introduced us. And she said, and this pretty well says it, she said, everyone should go out with him once. And that's kind of what started 50 years of this.